Alright, how's everyone doing today? It's Mostly Modern MTG here with a modern deck tech video. Today we're going over Splendid Valakut Dredge, or Valakut Dredge as Seth from MTG Goldfish would call it. I found the deck list on an article of his about brewing with Eldritch Moon, so I'm going to put a link to that in the description below. Otherwise, let's get right into the deck. Main deck, we have 4 of Shriekhorn, used to, well, ideally you'll be casting this on turn 1, trying to get Dredge cards into your graveyard from there. If not, cast Insolent Neonate. It's just as good at getting Dredge cards into your graveyard so you can start dredging right away. The reason it's called Splendid Valakut Dredge, or that's why I'm calling it that, is because it plays Splendid Reclamation from Eldritch Moon, returning all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. You want to play this in combination with Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, which, as you know, whenever a mountain enters battlefield under your control, if you have at least 5 of their mountains, it'll deal 3 damage to target creature or player. The reason this works well is because when you if I could talk, things would be a lot better, huh? Splendid Reclamation back the lands that you get from dredging cards into your graveyard. Specifically, you want the mountains. Boseiju, not so much you want to dredge that. You want that in play so you can cast this without it getting countered. You want to Reclamation when you have enough lands in your graveyard, mountains specifically, to trigger enough damage from Valakut or multiple Valakuts to kill your opponent, much like Scapeshift, but going about it in a bit of a different way, which is why you play all these dredge cards and stuff with removal spells with discard outlets so you can get dredge cards into your graveyard. You got some Noxious Revivals, probably mostly for putting lands back on top, such as Boseiju, which you don't really want in the graveyard anyways. You have Life from the Loam for that too. I've noticed I'm playing on Cockatrice because I don't have the money to buy the deck on MTGO right now. But I've noticed that Life from the Loam is actually very useful to dredge back and then cast to get like a couple of lands back, maybe not all 3. Unless you've literally dredged fetched lands and Boseijus, which is unfortunate, but it can happen. And Faithless Looting, standard in most of the dredge decks in Modern right now, but most of those revolve around getting creatures onto the battlefield and overrunning your opponent like that. We just kind of want to Scapeshift them out in a different way than Scapeshift does. In the sideboard, we have Engineered Explosives, getting rid of the... I've found it most useful against Death Shadow, getting rid of all those 1-drops before they can beat you down with them. Leyline of the Void, good for decks that are trying to... It's good against Dredge, for one. It's also good against things that play Snapcaster Mage. Not letting them recast spells is very useful, specifically counter spells. Ancient Grudge works well with Dredge, also works well if you just draw it. It's a cheap artifact removal spell. You can flash it back for 1 green. Dark Blast, maybe for removal spells of X1 creatures like Young Pyromancer, stuff like that. Seeing as how Delver lists are, or at least Grixis Delver is becoming more popular in the format. Also, actually it doesn't take care of too much from the Death Shadow list, so, but you can find ways to use it. Plus it has Dredge, so it works well with getting your lands into the graveyard. Have a couple more Lightning Axes for discard outlet / creature removal in the sideboard. We have some enchantment removal here. Good with the Dredge effect too, because it flashes back for 1 green, much like Ancient Grudge. And you have Thoughtseize, which is just a good value card, disrupting your opponent and seeing what they're up to. Kind of disrupts their plan from the hand they kept if you cast it on turn 1, and you can use it efficiently on other turns as well to disrupt their long game plan when you need to have more time to get those lands into your graveyard. And especially if you're playing against a control deck or even a deck that has, like, I suppose Remand doesn't help too much, but it does buy them a turn. You want to make sure you can play Splendid Reclamation with Boseiju mana, because you do have to pay the 2 life, but it can't be countered if you use this mana to cast this on an instant or sorcery. It only affects those two types, not enchantments or anything. But definitely something you want to keep your eye out on, specifically if you're playing against decks that have counterspells. Other than that, I think it's a really interesting way to go about kind of quote-unquote scape-shifting your opponent. Rather than playing scape-shift, you're playing this new, very cool card, and it is quite an interesting deck. I don't know how much Seth came up with this on his own. I'm pretty sure it was mostly just him, unless he was getting help from some others on brew ideas from Eldritch Moon. But props to him for making up this sick brew of a Dredge deck that is trying to get Valakut back onto the battlefield with this new Splendid Reclamation, which is just a very interesting card and definitely something that could be brewed around, much like this deck right here. Once again, I'm going to put the link to the article that this deck list was on that I found, the only place that I could find it, and that'll be in the description. And I hope you enjoyed the first episode of Modern Deck Techs from me, MostlyModernMTG. Hope you all have a good rest of your day. See you later.